70 years after Henrietta Lacks.
Henrietta Lacks.
Henrietta Lacks. Henrietta Lacks.
Henrietta Lacks.
Henrietta Lacks.
Henrietta Lacks.
On August 1, 1920, in Roanoke, Virginia, Laura Pleasant, later renamed for unknown reasons and most famously known as Henrietta Lacks, was born. After the childbirth-induced death of her mother, Eliza Pleasant, in 1924, their father, John Randall, was left as the sole caretaker of the Pleasant family. They eventually relocated to the, at the time, incorporated town of Clover, Virginia, in Halifax County. It was a sleepy and traditionally segregated town for the most part, where Henrietta and all her 9 siblings were raised by relatives and grandfather, after their father abandoned them. Growing up in Southside Virginia in a rural African-American community, working on her grandfather's tobacco farm and facing the cruel hardships of the Jim Crow era, Lacks was no stranger to the injustice of America. The society she was born into served to constantly remind her that the opportunities for black women of her class were highly limited. In 1935, at age 14, she became impregnated with her first son Lawrence by her first cousin David Day Lacks. Whether this act was consensual isn't clear, but their relationship continued, and 4 years later they gave birth to a daughter, Elsie. Henrietta eventually married David Lacks on April 10, 1941, in Halifax County, Virginia. Later, in hopes to seek economic opportunity with the booming factory years of World War II, they moved to Maryland to work at the Beltham Steel Sparrows Point plant. Henrietta and her 2 young children would follow not long after at Turner Station in Baltimore, an African-American dominated residential community. Together, the couple had another 3 children: David Jr., born 1947, Deborah, born 1949, and Joseph, born 1950. Access to hospital care was severely limited to black people due to the intensity of racial segregation, which led Henrietta to ignore most symptoms of physical discomfort and unwellness. This was, of course, until she began feeling anxious of a chronic vaginal bleeding and discomfort during sexual intercourse. Around the time of her 5th pregnancy, Lacks confided in her cousin that she was experiencing a pain and a knot in her cervix. Many attributed the discomfort to her childbirth or the possibility of her husband, David Lacks, known for his active infidelity, for passing on sexually transmitted diseases, such as human papillomavirus. Regardless, she was insistent that it was something else, for this feeling was present even before her recent pregnancy. As a result, these persistent symptoms led to her seeking medical attention to one of the few hospitals in the Baltimore area that treated black people at the time, under segregated conditions, of course, Johns Hopkins. On February 1st, 1951, Henrietta Lacks walked into Johns Hopkins and reported abnormal bleeding and the knot feeling in her womb, where she was referred to the gynecology department to be examined. In the gynecological service, she was diagnosed with an aggressive form of cervical cancer, epidermoid carcinoma, and had to undergo radium tube insert treatment, where essentially radioactive sources would be placed inside her body near her tumor in order to deliver a high dosage of radiation directly to her cancer cells, while minimizing damage to surrounding healthy tissue. As she underwent treatment by the gynecologist, Dr. Howard Jones was amazed at what he was seeing. He had never seen a tumor like Henrietta's ever, and so 2 small cervical samples of her tumor were removed. One was taken from a tumor and another from adjacent normal tissue, then sent to the laboratory of Dr. George Gay, without Henrietta's knowledge or explicit conformed consent. Unfortunately, by September 1951, Henrietta Lacks' cancer had metastasized, which is seen on her partial autopsy, and with no sign of improvement and in constant pain, she decided to return to demand admission, where she remained until her death on October 4, 1951, at age 31.
The tissue sample taken from her cervix gave rise to the first immortal human cell line, collectively known as HeLa cell line, named after Henrietta Lacks. Unlike previous human cell cultures, these cells reproduce rapidly, survived long-term in laboratory culture, and could be distributed to other laboratories worldwide. Researchers use HeLa cells for a huge variety of biomedical investigations, for example, vaccine developments, including the polio vaccine, studies of viruses, cancer, gene mapping, drug testing, and more. By Henrietta's death, her cells continued to live on in laboratories globally and have possibly contributed more to human biology and medicine than any other single human donor. The HeLa cell line's impact is vast. Scientists have described that if one were to open freezers in many labs around the world, one would likely find billions of Henrietta cells. Her cells have been used to test the effects of toxins, radiation, viruses to study human chromosomes, and to explore cancer mechanisms. Although she only lived for 31 years, Henrietta Lacks' legacy continues to live through the cells, contributing to scientific discoveries and new therapies. One of the most significant reasons Henrietta Lacks' story endures is the ethical questions it raises. At the time her cells were taken, the notion of informed consent for harvesting human tissues was not yet standard practices. Thus, her cells were taken and used widely without her knowledge or that of her family.
When Henrietta Lacks' cells were first taken in 1951, neither she nor her family had any idea what was happening. There was no conversation, no request for permission, and certainly no informed consent. In a case of medical oversight, it reflected something far deeper and more painful: the systematic racism and exploitation that the Black patients often endured in American medicine during the 20th century. Henrietta's family remained completely unaware of what had been done until more than 20 years after her death. They were never told about the enormous scientific contributions her cells had made, nor were they ever consulted or reimbursed, as medicine companies and researchers profited from HeLa cells. The truth had finally reached them. It caused immense emotional and spiritual pain, not only because of what had happened to Henrietta, but because it revealed how little their voices, their consent, and their humanity had mattered. To Henrietta's family, this was never just about science. It was about visibility, trust, and dignity. The right to know what happens to one's own body, or to one of a loved one. The story became a mirror reflecting the long history of Black bodies being used without consent, from experiments on enslaved people to the Tuskegee syphilis study and beyond. Public awareness of her story grew even more dramatically after the publication of Rebecca Skloot's The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks in 2010. The book reunited conversations about medical ethics, informed consent, and racial inequality in biomedical research, and placed Henrietta's case as a landmark. It brought Henrietta's name into classrooms, hospitals, and policy discussions worldwide, sparking long overdue questions. Why was consent ignored? How often has this happened to other marginalized communities? And most importantly, how do we ensure it never happens again? Henrietta Lacks' story is not only one about scientific triumph, but also a profound human injustice. It reminds us that behind every discovery lies a life, a family, and a history, and that true progress in science must go hand in hand with respect, consent, and equity.
Before the 1950s, doctors often collected tissue samples from patients during surgery without asking permission. There were no clear rules about consent or patient privacy. That changed because of Henrietta Lacks. As her story came to light, it revealed how patients, especially Black Americans, had been used in research without consent. This injustice led the medical community to rethink how studies were done. In 1979, the Belmont Report was created to set strict ethical rules for research. It introduced 3 guiding principles: respect for persons, meaning people must give informed consent; beneficence, research should do good, not harm; and justice, all groups should be treated fairly in research. These principles shaped modern research policies and led to the Institutional Review Board, or IRBs, which now make sure every study explains its purpose, risks, and how samples will be used. She continues to influence into our modern law. In 1996, the HIPAA privacy rule gave patients the right to control who sees their medical information, protecting privacy in ways that Henrietta never had. And in 2013, the National Institutes of Health made an agreement with the Lacks family, giving them a voice in who can access Henrietta's genomic data and requiring scientists to credit her in their research. Today, every consent form, every privacy policy, and every patient protection rule reflects the changes sparked by her story. Henrietta Lacks didn't just change medicine, she reformed its conscience.